The future of North Korea remains one of the most complex and debated issues in international relations. For over 7 decades, the isolated state has been ruled by the Kim dynasty, with each successive leader further entrenching the nation's isolation and authoritarianism. Despite international pressure, sanctions, and internal challenges, North Korea has managed to survive, primarily due to its nuclear deterrent, powerful security apparatus, and absolute control over information. But as the world changes around North Korea, the question arises, what lies ahead for the Hermit Kingdom? This final part of our series will explore several potential paths for North Korea, ranging from gradual economic reforms to a dramatic regime collapse or even unification with South Korea. 1. Continued isolation and stability. The most likely scenario, at least in the short term, is that North Korea continues its current path of isolation and strict control under Kim Jong-un. Since taking power in 2011, Kim Jong-un has demonstrated his ability to maintain the regime's control, combining the traditional hallmarks of North Korean governance, fear, loyalty, and propaganda, with slight economic reforms and strategic diplomacy. Kim has allowed limited market activities within the Jongmadang, the black market economy that provides citizens with essential goods, despite the state's restrictions. However, this allowance is carefully controlled, giving the government leverage over citizens' livelihoods while preventing too much economic independence that could threaten the regime. At the same time, Kim has maintained a firm grip on military power and enhanced North Korea's nuclear capabilities, further ensuring his security against foreign intervention. For North Korea, this status quo scenario means continued isolation, nuclear development, and control over its people. For the international community, this path implies more diplomatic standoffs, as North Korea will likely continue to test missiles, seek sanctions relief, and periodically engage in negotiations with world powers for economic concessions. 2. Gradual economic reforms. Without political liberalization. A more optimistic future possibility is that North Korea follows a model of economic reform similar to China's path in the late 20th century. In this scenario, North Korea would cautiously open up parts of its economy to foreign investment and market-based reforms without relaxing its political control. Kim Jong-un has hinted at interest in economic development, acknowledging that North Korea's economy is under severe strain, especially after the effects of COVID-19, continued sanctions, and internal mismanagement. These economic reforms could include greater allowance for the Jongmadang market, opening special economic zones for foreign investment, and encouraging tourism from friendly nations like China and Russia. Already, we've seen North Korea experimenting with these ideas on a small scale, though progress has been slow and cautious due to fears of ideological contamination. However, the biggest challenge in this scenario is that North Korea's strict controls over information and its strong nationalistic and self-reliant ideology may limit the extent of such reforms. North Korea's leadership fears that exposure to foreign ideas and economic interdependence could threaten the regime's ideological control over its people. Therefore, while limited economic reform is a possibility, it's unlikely to transform North Korea into an open market economy anytime soon. 3. Regime collapse and humanitarian crisis. One of the more dramatic and worrying possibilities is the sudden collapse of the North Korean regime. This scenario could be triggered by several factors: an internal coup, mass uprising due to economic desperation, or the unexpected death or incapacitation of Kim Jong-un without a clear successor. Given the highly centralized nature of the North Korean government, any disruption in the leadership could lead to political chaos and even a humanitarian crisis. If the regime were to collapse, North Korea would face a severe crisis. The state controls virtually all resources, meaning that a sudden collapse could result in mass starvation, a lack of essential services, and even civil unrest as factions vie for power. The international community would likely be called upon to provide humanitarian aid, and neighboring countries, particularly China and South Korea, would be concerned about a potential refugee crisis. This scenario poses enormous risks for regional stability. South Korea and the United States would have to navigate the challenges of potentially intervening to stabilize North Korea, while China would be concerned about its border security and the possibility of a unified Korea under a U.S. allied government. The collapse scenario, though uncertain, would be one of the most difficult situations to manage on the Korean Peninsula. 4. Unification with the South. The possibility of North and South Korea reuniting is one of the most discussed yet complex futures for the Korean Peninsula. In theory, reunification could end the long-standing division and bring North Korea's citizens the freedoms and economic opportunities enjoyed by South Koreans. However, the practical and political challenges to unification are enormous. First, the ideological divide between North and South Korea would be difficult to overcome. For over 70 years, North Koreans have been conditioned to view South Korea and the United States as their primary enemies. Additionally, the economic disparity between the two Koreas is staggering. South Korea's economy is approximately 50 times larger than North Korea's, and the costs of integrating the two nations would be immense. South Korea would need to make substantial investments in infrastructure, education, and healthcare to raise North Korea's standard of living, similar to the West German efforts in East Germany after the fall of the Berlin Wall, though on an even larger scale. Politically, China's role in reunification is another critical factor. China would likely oppose a unified Korea aligned with the US, and any reunification effort would need to navigate these complex geopolitical interests. While many South Koreans support the idea of reunification, the practical challenges mean that it would require a carefully managed transition, significant international cooperation, and a lengthy period of economic stabilization. For these reasons, peaceful reunification remains a distant prospect, though one that offers hope for the future of the Korean people. 5. Gradual opening and peaceful coexistence. A final possibility, though idealistic, is a scenario where North Korea gradually opens up to the world while maintaining its political sovereignty. This path would require North Korea to build better relationships with its neighbors, reduce its reliance on nuclear weapons, and slowly reform its economy while retaining a one-party political system. In this scenario, North Korea would look to countries like Vietnam as a model, engaging in foreign trade and diplomacy without adopting Western-style democracy. Such a shift would be gradual and would likely require new leadership willing to reform but retain centralized control. Achieving peaceful coexistence would demand extensive trust-building measures, both from North Korea and the international community. The US, South Korea, and other nations would need to reduce military pressures, while North Korea would need to dismantle aspects of its isolationist policies and nuclear program. This scenario, while challenging, could ultimately bring stability to the Korean Peninsula. To summarize, North Korea's future is deeply uncertain, shaped by its unique history, the Kim family's iron grip, and the complex geopolitics of East Asia. While each of these scenarios has its challenges, North Korea will likely continue to shape global politics in significant ways. Whether North Korea pursues gradual reforms, remains locked in its current isolation, or faces a more dramatic transition, the world will be watching closely. The international community's approach to North Korea, balancing diplomacy, economic incentives, and pressure, will play a crucial role in determining which path the Hermit Kingdom ultimately follows. Have you enjoyed this 5-part series on North Korea? If so, let us know in the comments, and feel free to suggest future topics for us to deep dive. And thanks, as ever, for watching.